Today's topic of discussion is English Renaissance, which is from 1550 to 1660. But this English Renaissance is further divided into four periods. There are very ups and downs in this period. First of all, there is Elizabethan period, then Jacobean period, and Caroline period, and Puritan period. Today's topic we will discuss Elizabethan period. Its time is from 1558 to 1603. This age is also known as Golden Age of English Literature, and its other name included Elizabethan Age, Shakespearean Age, and Renaissance. And it is Renaissance means rebirth of learning, rebirth of literature, revival of literature, not its rebirth only in the field of literature but in every field of life, and there are new discoveries and opening of theater for literature and more. So basically it is a comparison with Latin and Greek philosophies, and it is a beginning for the Westerns to create their own picture. Renaissance not was not directly introduced in England in 16th century, but it was first introduced in Italy in 14th century. And from Italian Renaissance, Chaucer was very influenced, if you remember in my previous video. Okay, then there is Elizabethan period, and before Elizabethan period there was a Tudor period, and after Elizabethan period there is a Jacobean period. And Elizabethan age was famous because of their poets, its poets, dramatists, and prose writers, and they were influenced by different traditional works of Europe and from the different areas. And most of writings was influenced by Italian work, like their inspiration was through Greeks and Romans. And Sir Thomas More, who was English writer and who wrote Utopia because he was inspired by Italian literature, and he wrote that in Greek. Sir Thomas More, who was the first person who wrote about utopia. Utopia is a word used to describe a perfect imaginary world. More's book images a complex, self contained community set on an island in which people share a common culture and a way of life. So, this work of Sir Thomas, from this work, we can understand how the people think about their imaginary world and how they are imaginative. So, there is a group of people that is named as university weights, in which few people are involved, named John Lilly, Thomas Gate, George Peele, Thomas Locke, Robert Greene, Christopher Marlowe, and Thomas Nash. They were people who were highly educated from Cambridge and Oxford universities, and Shakespeare was influenced by them. The phrase "इश्क और जग में सब जायज़ है" was first used by John Lilly, and he wrote Opus Anatomy of Wit. After this, we will discuss about the major works, in which first of all there is Edmund Spenser, who wrote Fairy Queen and Shepherd Calendar, and Sir Philip Sidney, who wrote sonnets, and William Shakespeare, who was famous for his dramas, and Francis Bacon, who was a famous prose writer, and then there is Thomas Wade, who was a famous poet. Henry Howard in 16th century, he was influenced by the Italian sonnets, and he introduced that in England, that is a Petrarchian style. Petrarchian sonnets that contain octet and sestet. And a sonnet is defined as it contains 14 lines, in which three quadrants, each quadrant contains four lines, and sonnet has one couplet that contains two lines. This can be your short question in exam. And sonnets established in England, then Shakespeare also wrote sonnets. He wrote 154 sonnets, and the world best sonnet is considered as Shall I Compare Thee, that is written by Shakespeare. And sonnet was introduced by Thomas White and Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, who introduced the blank verse. And blank verse was used by Christopher Marlowe, John Milton, and Shakespeare. Okay, this is the area in which we discussed about the poetry forms, and after this there is another major area that is very famous for the Elizabethan age, that is the theatre. So there is a name Ben Jonson who was a dramatist, and drama is a major genre of literature, and Shakespeare also wrote many dramas, and he has a variety of dramas in which we can see his histories, tragedies, comedy and tragicomedy. In tragedy there are very famous tragedies like Hamlet, Othello and King Lear, and in comedy there is Comedy of Error. But at the last time of his age, he wrote the romance and tragicomedy. Tragicomedy included Tempest. Its Tempest is a work in which we can see his life reflection, in which he was the last days of his career. There is another name, Christopher Marlowe, who was very famous for his dramas, and Shakespeare was influenced by him. But there is a reason why Christopher Marlowe was not as much famous as Shakespeare, because whenever we talk about literature, there is a first question aroused in our mind, that is about the Shakespeare. Who is Shakespeare? We not think about the Christopher Marlowe, because Christopher Marlowe only wrote morality focused plays, and in his works included Edward II and Dr. Faustus. These tragedies are very influential as compared to Shakespearean tragedy, because Shakespeare chose a universal theme in which he talked about revenge, he talked about love, he talked about human instinct that is acceptable, and Christopher Marlowe chose the morality focused area. So that is why the Shakespeare is very famous in this regard, and because he wrote universal ideas and human instinct ideas. He wrote love, he wrote about romance, he wrote about feelings and love, revenge, etc. So there is another writer, Thomas Dekker, who was the realistic, and he wrote about the poets and poetry. And other writer, Robert Greene, who attacked on Shakespeare. At that time, the drama were written in blank verse that was introduced in England, and Christopher that is used by Christopher Marlowe and Shakespeare, and performed in front of Elizabeth, because she was a dancer and art lover. And there is a question why this age is very acceptable and a growing age, because there is a peace between Catholic and Protestants. This age was full of the variety of the writers, like there were poets like Edmund Spenser, and dramatists like William Shakespeare and Ben Jonson, and prose writers like Sir Philip Sidney and university wits Christopher Marlowe, etc. So this age is like a flowery age in which we can see the variety of writers and authors and dramatists, poets, prose writers, etc. And there is another major characteristic of its acceptance, that this age was boosted by invention of printing press by William Caxton in 1476, that boosted the literature in every corner of the Europe. So this question can also be asked in your exam. So get prepared yourself, and if you have any other question you can ask me in comment box.